Here are the directions for Part 2. In this part, you will hear 5 passages, A through E. Each passage will be followed by 2 questions, number 11 through number 20. For each question, you will have 10 seconds to choose the best answer and mark your answer on your answer sheet. The passage and the questions will be given only once. Now, let's begin. A. The Cumberland Road. In the early 1800s, U.S. President Thomas Jefferson commissioned the young nation's first national highway, known as the Cumberland Road. It was begun in 1811 and connected Cumberland, Maryland, on the United States East Coast, with Vandalia, Illinois, nearly 1,000 kilometers to the west. Jefferson hoped to open up the newly admitted state of Ohio during a period when land transportation consisted mainly of forest trails and expensive private toll roads. However, there was tremendous opposition to his plan, as many believed it to be in violation of the U.S. Constitution. Opponents argued that authority to build roads belonged only to the states. The Cumberland Road began part of an ongoing power struggle between the states and the federal government until Jefferson eventually emerged victorious. The road provided thousands of settlers with access to territories in the American West throughout much of the 19th century. A boom in railroad construction during the 1870s, however, caused the Cumberland Road to fall into disuse and disrepair. It was not until the advent of the automobile that it regained prominence in the 1920s and served as an inspiration for a new interstate highway system that is still in use today.
Questions. Number 11. What did some people believe about the Cumberland Road? Number 12. What happened to the Cumberland Road in the late 1800s? B. Incentive pay. In recent decades, more and more businesses have been offering performance-based financial incentives to employees in the hopes of raising productivity and motivation. And according to research in the United States, incentives like bonuses based on quotas do boost productivity. The researchers also determined that quarterly bonuses were more stimulating than annual ones. Furthermore, they found that reaching quotas did not stop high achievers from continuing to put forth an extra effort, especially if there were incentives for overachieving. Not all experts favor incentive pay systems, however. In recent years, a major American bank that had implemented an incentive pay system found itself in the headlines due to various legal and ethical violations. The bank's incentive pay and evaluation systems placed enormous pressure on employees, and many began resorting to fraud in order to meet quotas. According to some experts, this is an example of employees' tendencies to make poor decisions and put their morals aside when struggling to earn bonuses. Furthermore, since many systems reward some employees at the expense of others, incentive pay has been said to negatively affect employee satisfaction and company harmony.
Questions. Number 13. What is one thing the researchers in the United States found about incentive pay? Number 14. What is one possible disadvantage of incentive pay?
C. Grasshoppers and locusts. Many people do not realize that some species of the cute green hopping insects known as grasshoppers can turn into terrifying swarming locusts that destroy millions of tons of farmers' crops. Grasshopper species do not always transform this way, however. It is only when the dry climate they live in suddenly gets a lot of precipitation that they lay huge numbers of eggs. They take advantage of the increase in plant life that the moisture will bring. When the weather turns dry again, however, the lack of food causes the grasshoppers' bodies to release a hormone called serotonin. This transforms them into the locusts that cause so much damage. They change colour and become much more social, forming huge swarms that can eat as much food as 35,000 people in a single day. Until now, farmers have generally tried to control locusts using pesticides. However, the discovery that it is serotonin that transforms them has opened up new possibilities. Researchers found that giving chemicals to grasshoppers that prevent the release of serotonin could stop them from becoming swarming locusts. If this could be done on a large scale, perhaps these pests could be controlled or eliminated.
Questions. Number 15. What happens before grasshoppers turn into swarming locusts? Number 16. How might locusts be controlled in the future? D. Austerity. During times of economic recession, governments frequently adopt austerity measures, such as the elimination of non-essential programs and cuts to everything from healthcare to education spending. Critics of austerity, though, argue that it can actually delay economic recovery. Government spending cuts cause businesses and consumers to reduce their spending, and this leads to bankruptcies and unemployment. There may be an even more serious problem, however. Research shows that low-income citizens are more affected by austerity, and the hardships that result can cause mental and physical changes that negatively impact children's learning, emotional control, memory, and language. In the long run, this can have a tremendous impact on society and necessitate increased spending on things like welfare, healthcare, and prisons down the road. On the other hand, there may be times when austerity is needed. Out-of-control budget deficits tend to reduce investor confidence regarding the economy, but austerity can restore it. Countries like Finland and Sweden are said to have stimulated their economies in this way. Furthermore, government spending can contribute to inflation, which is often a contributing factor in recessions. Austerity measures can reduce inflation and thereby fight economic downturns.
Questions. Number 17. What is one possible negative effect of government austerity measures? Number 18. What effect is austerity said to have had in Finland and Sweden? E. Regrowing limbs. Although medical science has made great progress in the treatment of serious injuries, regrowing lost limbs has long seemed like an impossible dream. Recently, however, scientists have utilized a new technique that allowed frogs to regrow functional limbs after they had been amputated. Both humans and frogs have what are known as stem cells. These important cells have the ability to transform themselves into any of the specialized cell types within the body, including bone and muscle. However, when a limb is lost, the body produces scar tissue, and this prevents stem cells from being used to grow a new arm or leg. In the experiment, the researchers put a special covering called a biodome on the places where the frog's legs had been amputated. This contained a mixture of 5 drugs, preventing scar tissue from forming. Incredibly, use of the biodome in the first 24 hours after amputation allowed the frogs to regrow functional limbs. Although the regrown limbs had muscles and bones, there were sometimes defects, and some parts were incomplete. However, the researchers speculate that utilizing alternative drug combinations could result in limbs without imperfections. The scientists are optimistic that once the treatment has been perfected in frogs, it could someday be applied to humans who have had amputations.
Questions. Number 19. According to the speaker, what allowed the frogs to regrow limbs? Number 20. What does the speaker imply that scientists will try next?